Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, February 12th, picking up in the afternoon in House Transportation. We have a regular guest, Jeremy Reed from Agency of Transportation, with a very generic Agency of Transportation updates topic on the agenda. But what the members had asked is at one point about more information about V-Transparency, more website related, and some other pieces and questions. And since Jeremy's got a huge amount of experience and knowledge of how this works, we could probably go into a lot of different chances. And for members that we don't often get to ask a whole lot of random questions and informational pieces and how things work, this one's going to be a pretty wide open Q&A after some kind of prep on the website and some pieces. So feel free to go in lots of different areas of questions and information, how to find information and what things are out there. So for now, we'll turn it over to you, and we'll be open and back and forth on this piece.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair Walker. For the record, Jeremy Reed, Chief Engineer with the Agency of Transportation. So, yeah, just wanted to give committee members a quick rundown of V-Transparency. There is a lot of content here, and a lot of it is not necessarily highway-centric, meaning the highway division. So I'll do my best to answer any and all questions you may have, but this is definitely meant to be interactive. So by all means, ask, and we can kind of navigate the site at your discretion. So with that, I'll share my screen, and we can just kind of hit the high level pieces. So this is the landing page. If you just Google V-Transparency or any browser, this should be where you are brought. And I'll just scroll down to what are some pretty popular places and show you a little bit of the content. But by all means, we can pause and dig deeper as you want. So first one, Vermont 511, that has all the road closures, road conditions, traffic, like during the eclipse would show where traffic was moving slowly. And then the plow finder, middle of the storm, you can click on the plow finder and it will tell you where each plow is and essentially how long it's been since they've been on your travel route. Various maintenance activities, you can look at what the districts would look like, the type of work they do, and any closures due to maintenance activities. The section that your constituents might be very interested in is the project maps. So just click on project map and you can see how glitchy this is here. Okay. And this will be your landing page. And wait for it to fully load here. So you can click on the map, and this is probably the easiest place to find any information on projects in your districts. The one caveat, though, is that only projects that have construction funding for the next 3 years show on this. So I'll just pick on Representative Burke a little bit. Putney Road doesn't have any construction funding for the next 3 years, so it won't show as a project on this. I don't believe. But there's a couple different filters you can do, whether looking at planned or projects under construction. And I'll just sort of randomly pick a project here.
I was going to say, maybe in deference to our former vice chair, who's always been on the Route 7 Brandon piece, we could talk about that one, or the huge 22A. Somebody might be interested in the long-term Route 78 widening. I bet there's a project in Bennington somewhere.
There are.
But if I guess I would be fair, we don't have a Brandon Pittsburgh representative on the committee right now, but I have an echo in my ear that'll come up soon.
And I got a funny story to tell you about that offline, but
the echoing or the Pittsburgh project?
Pittsburgh Brandon project.
I'm from Brandon. My mom lives in Brandon. It's the Brandon Pittsburgh project.
Oh, okay.
If former Vice Chair Shaw was here, it would be the Pittsburgh Brandon project.
So you can just click on a project.
2A is a big one.
And it'll give you some rough construction times. You can click on the fact sheet which then opens up another sheet that gives a little bit more information as far as the project. And actually, this is not the big one. This is just a culvert on 22A. And so you can see expected culvert replacement this year. I'll just go back down to Brattleboro here, just because I know I was looking at it earlier. So just click on this. Here's the project description. So this is Class 1 paving, expected May of 2025. Again, clicking on the fact sheet gives you an idea of the scope of the project, contact information. In this case, it's the project manager. Oftentimes for projects that once they get to construction, we'll have a public information officer listed. And that's where we can direct any public inquiries for damage claims, if there's some gripe about the traffic or just concerns about what the scope of the project is. That would be your first point of contact.
Well, you answered that.
Okay.
My direction will point it, well, maybe we can think of a project earlier and a little bit later. What do you usually see for contacts? And then kind of if members do reach out, what kind of interaction do they expect, and what are their expectations in terms of they're getting an email? Are they expecting them regularly? Can you kind of tell me what they're trained to answer, look for, and then is it different stages of the project must have very different types of requests, and who do they come from? Yeah, and kind of a couple of examples of what you guys do and handle this would be.
So more often than not, sort of our run-of-the-mill projects, if it's not in construction, what you'll see here is the project manager's name. So that's a V-Trans personnel who is the project manager getting that project to construction. Obviously, if somebody reaches out with them, whether it be a committee member or a constituent of yours, you should receive a response in a fairly timely manner. Even if they don't know the answer, the expectation is that they'll be like, okay, it might take me some time. Let me get that information for you. If we go to a construction project that's actually out there, it'll generally be our PIO person. And I'm just going to come up 91 here to Westminster. Finding it immediately. So I picked the wrong Westminster. So this is actually another V-Trans project manager. Believe it or not, there is supposed to be some bridges right here, but I think because we finished them in the fall, they've already pulled it down. Let me get to another active project here. So I think just get to something I know is active. Okay, so this is an active, but here's another good example. So this is a bridge project in Wolcott, and it's part of the Accelerated Bridge Program. So again, you'll see kind of the generic information. But in this, it will also have the detour route. So when we do close the road, here's the anticipated detour route for that project. This project's big enough, being an accelerated bridge project or the bridge program, that it will have its own website where you can see the scoping report, various alternatives, conceptual plans, preliminary plans, final plans, and then the project fact sheet, which I just showed you. And so again, all that's publicly facing. me get down here to Plymouth. So similarly, this is part of some Hurricane Irene work that we're doing. And because we're bundling a handful of Bridgewater and Plymouth projects together and trying to sequence them, in this case, we do have a public information consultant already on board. So to the chair's question, at different stages, we will bring in those public information consultants. Those are generally third-party consultants that will do a lot of that public outreach. And again, this is the expectation that they can handle anything project related that either traveling public or committee members may know. If not, they will certainly be able to direct to a more appropriate person. And again, various documents, technical documents, I'm assuming these are very similar to the plans. And then also kind of just some pictures and rough project scope at this point.
Questions, please.
Yeah, if you have an emergency project, like I take it that just was there, and I'm thinking of the Red Village Road up in Lindenville, is that immediately onto your get to? I know some of these take several years to get organized, but when you have an emergency like the one you just showed, does that mean you jump right into it and it's already on the map?
So it depends. In the immediate aftermath of the storm, obviously, we're not prioritizing that. There will be information on the 511. So like 114 and Berwick, we had to close when the bridge washed out. So that will be immediately posted that there's a bridge out, and that'll be on the 511 site. It will take us a little bit of time just to sort of get a project stood up. There's just a bit of a bureaucratic process there to get federal highway, get a project programmed, and then start moving forward. So it'll take some time for those permanent projects. The immediate aftermath is 511 probably has the most accurate information. The other thing,
your project, the Red Village Road, when it finally gets in place.
So yeah, I was just going to that. So Red Village Road, we assisted in that, but that was actually a town road. So there are some town highways that do fall under the federal aid system. So Great Brook Road in Plainfield being an example, where for whatever reason that is under federal highway. And so we will help that. Red Village Road, our scope was effectively just to go get the debris out of the river. So we partnered with Casella and the town to kind of, if you're doing road building, you're charging to the village of Linden or the town of Linden. And if you're getting debris out of the river and disposing of it, they're charging to V-Trans. So that's how that specific project went.
Representative Couch? I'm sorry, you all set? Everything else?
I'm good. Yep. Thank you.
I can't help but click around my.
Yeah.
So it shows like Vermont 2A is a line on your thing, a green line. When I clicked it, it said culvert replacement. So is it just one culvert, or are they gonna go through and do a bunch of them there?
So direction
A couple of
A little
other
further
places.
south.
Yeah.
right here. So there could be a couple things going on here. My guess is this is a bunch of culvert replacements in advance of a paving project. So just knowing the project manager, this is a maintenance project manager out of the districts. And so, yes, they are replacing culverts along 2A. And if we can get enough clarity there. So I think this will be the paving project.
Okay, so for a follow on the next year or whenever, they'll be
Yeah.
paving. And is it fair to say, the reason for replacing those culverts, some have maybe not in good shape? but would another reason be hydraulically, they need to be bigger?
More often than not, it would be the condition, unless there was chronic issues. So we want to preemptively upsize them within, the confines of, in advance of a paving project,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the sort of scope there was, we're going to come through with a paving project in 2 years, so we'll do some work in advance of that, replace all the poor condition culverts that need to be replaced, and then obviously you'll have a better surface at the end of the paving
Or
project.
potentially a problem culvert might, even if the condition's good, might get upgraded.
Potentially, yep. And a lot of that might be depending on the scope of the project, but what the objective of that paving project is, right? If it's just to buy us some time until we are coming through with a more intensive project, then we may delay it and just do that. So it's sort of context specific.
So-
Thanks.
Jeremy, with the risk of being online, if people have, whether it be the public or a representative, and they have concerns, which the Heinsberg's gone through, the ability to influence these projects and or to ask the questions, to say, should this be a bigger one or not, or what are you gonna do with this part of the lane, whatever it might be.
Sure.
Are these the people that we should be starting with?
Yes.
Or, and how do you recommend when people
So,
say, as whatever
Yeah.
project it is, and how do we handle that? And if we want to, I'm not sure that the right word, if we want to understand what they're gonna do, and
yep,
we think that, is this being considered or that, what do we do? How do we handle it? Who do we talk to?
yeah. So this would be the best first point of contact. And so, if you're trying to understand the scope of the project, what we're trying to achieve, things like that, this person can absolutely address that. Let's say there's something where the traveling public identifies a concern, whatever it is. There are a couple different ways to get that on our radar and understand if we're taking any positive sort of steps to address it. First would be to work with our PCs or the town and just say, is this on either the town or the Regional Planning Commission's radar? Depending on if it is, they might be able to say, yes, we've spoken to VTrans, this is what's going on. If it's not on their radar, I'd sort of work through that process to be like, well, this is the experience I'm having, just because collectively that means the town or the RPC, by having them bring something to us, it just carries a little bit more weight and it sort of helps us sort out the priorities a little bit. Alternatively, you could reach out to some of the district forces, and I'll go back to the main page here. And you can find, whoops, not that main page. So within the highway maintenance districts, so depending again on your location, there should be some contact information. I've got too many screens open here. So you can go in here, and I believe you can find the contact information. For instance, in St. Albans. Oops, that's just a map. Okay, yeah, so D8 in St. Albans, Swanton, it's the new location.
It's moved.
It is moving.
Is there a new building somewhere near that?
There could be. So here's some contact information for that neck of the woods, right? And just some generic information in the map of the district. And so again, if the RPCs in the towns are like, no, nothing we're involved in, you can always reach out to the district and say, whatever, there's a huge pothole here, you want to pop a tire, whatever the case may be, to help point it on the district maintenance radar.
I know the reception would vary dramatically from person to person, but those district managers be receptive to an outreach from somebody on this committee.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
I just pointed out because try to figure out what things you're active in and what you're involved in and what your community questions come from. It's on your list of many sources that you might want.
Yeah. And so within the project fields, I went to the map just because it's kind of the easiest thing, but there are other ways to query similar information as well. Just by punching in your town and whatnot. So didn't want to glaze over that too fast. I don't suspect there's a lot of inquiries, but we do have a bunch of information on the rail lines. If you have a rail line in your district, I believe this would be for the state-owned rail lines, so not NECR, I believe. Was there a question? No. Another point of interest could be the pavement conditions map. Obviously, if you're driving the road, you kind of know what the conditions are, but with this performance dashboard or the specific conditions of a particular road, you can kind of get a bigger global feel for what we're talking about. So I think the secretary's mentioned it. We talked about performance measures, and we do recognize even if our state performance measures are, easily being achieved, if your lived experience every day is, pounding down a road that's not in great shape, that's 100% of your experience. So we get that, but I would just sort of bring up this again, if your constituents are like, what does V-Trans ever do? $100 million in paving, and I never see anything up there, right? Hypothetically, right? You can look at, and this is basically a dashboard that shows what our network condition is over time relative to our performance measures.
Well, everybody's looking at the same.
I was gonna say, they're taxing the site at this point.
Certainly are. Go ahead. Representative White?
So Jeremy, just to clarify, so if we see issues in our town, if we see a project that is slated for the next year or two, or if we have an issue, the best thing to do is to reach out to the RPCs first, because they're just in better contact with.
If there's a project listed, contact the person for the contact information listed. If there's no project listed and you're like, hey, I think we need to do something here, I think the RPCs would be the best bet, because they're responsible. Just given the budget constraints, we haven't taken in a lot of projects from the RPCs lately, but they help prioritize regional concerns and regional needs, and then funnel it up to our asset management team.
Okay, and that could be anything from like big potholes to, looks like we have a paving project planned for 2027, but maybe we could get a bike lane on there or anything like that.
Yeah, potholes, what I'll call sort of general maintenance, should probably go to the districts. The RPCs are more interested in capital projects type thing, but to the end of your question, hey, I see a paving project 3 years out. Can we talk about a bike lane or maybe a different lane configuration or something like that? Or even, hey, there's been a bunch of drive-offs, maybe some guardrails, some better ditching with, signage, whatever the case could be.
Okay. So
these are our pavement conditions over time. So basically a 10-year period. And the two pavement conditions that we look at is the travel weighted average. So we take 1/10 of a mile across the whole network, multiply it basically by the number of cars, and that way it weights heavier traveled roads more than the lesser traveled roads. And so our target there is 70, but then we also want to have sort of a minimum level of expectation. And so we try to keep the percent of miles in very poor condition below 25, which, as you can see, we've been doing. So those are what $100 million gets you basically.
Yeah, I think, I don't remember if it was this year or last year, we had a good presentation on the efforts to go and measure the roads. You have scientific survey, you go and you do all the roads. Talking with the League of Cities and Towns, they, not throwing them under the bus, they said, geez, the state does a really good job of measuring state roads. It would be really nice if we could apply those measurements to town roads to, you could look at overall how are town roads doing, then each town, how are they doing? And today, I don't think they have anything like that. They just, it's just judgment of, the public of like, this town's better than that, or the town itself, and maybe the town's ability to raise funds or the expectations of the town. So is that possible? We could help municipalities with that?
I mean, possible, yes, it's just a matter of resources, right? And, then the sort of underlying question is, once you have that data, what are you going to do with it, right? So does that open the box to saying, okay, the town should either direct aid to the towns with sort of lower, performance numbers, or is it still pure mileage based? Or does the state want to start doing class 2 paving projects, right? So I think there's one question that can be answered that then spawns a bunch of other questions.
It always falls back to local control versus state, right?
Right, I mean, we do the class 1s at some frequency, but even that is, can get somewhat political in that, wow, my town has more traffic volume or the conditions less, and we try to look at it in a very data-driven approach, but sometimes that doesn't always work out.
Does the state still rent, or not rent, but lease the vehicle that goes on the roads there? Yep. Used to. Yeah, a little presentation on that back in the day there. It was pretty impressive how it goes on the roads and all the cameras and does the bumps and.
Yeah, it's
Everything. It's
kind of a, how do I want to say it? Souped up minivan, for lack of a better word. And yeah, it's got all kind of instrumentation and a consultant does all that data collection for us. And then we distill it all down. And, that's exactly what this map is. You can just pick a segment of road and it basically assigns a score to it for every 1/10 of a mile based on tracking, how many bumps, et cetera, et cetera. So.
But when we do that contract, would it be feasible to say you're gonna do the towns,
Yeah, I mean.
I'm just,
well,
I mean,
before I say, yeah, feasible, I don't know about, like possible, yes. I mean, it's a resource thing. I don't know if they have the time to, what it would take to sort of build this. Yeah, but so here's an example. Whoops. So here's a stretch, right? And then this is what the condition is over time.
Screen.
So this is
The
pretty good, right?
all right. No.
It'll fix it if you just do them all in Franklin County.
And so this shows the pavement condition over time, right? And it's a 0 to 100 score. You can see and this is a fairly new road, obviously, part of the bypass. Pretty good. And then here you can see in 22, we probably did a project and it got significantly better. So that's your historic pavement condition. Some other stuff that's on here, bridge inspection reports, and the bridge inspections map. That's kind of a wonky type information where the general public probably, it's very technical in nature. I'll just leave it at that. So by all means, it's public facing, but probably a lot of your constituents won't get a ton of information out of that.
Do you do bids on this?
This we do in-house, the bridge inspections we do in-house.
No, bids, like on projects, like is that part of this webpage, like you find? bids
no.
are coming in at or no?
No, so that would be on our actual website, so,
Okay.
hold on, okay, yep, so, here's the, finance administration website. So then, you can go to contract admin and bid results. Design bid build. So there's our bid reports for anything done recently. So this will be 2025. And then they've got an archive here where you can go back to historical data. where you've got all the bids going back to two thousand
You
eight.
don't mind, I want to click on the latest bid that came in, just out of curiosity,
Sure.
what it came in,
Yeah.
you know, how we're doing here.
So I'll just click on this one, and this one came in under, so good choice.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
Feels.
Right, yeah.
You walked right into that one.
Right. So because this is public facing until we actually execute the contract, we don't show what the engineer's estimate is. But I can tell you this came in under,
Yeah.
and you have everybody's bid rolled up, so you got 3.2 million versus 3.6.
That's at Bridge North of 110.
No, this is a paving project out 302, I believe. No, this has to be 110. Yeah, this is 110.
Really well.
What's it cost average per mile of tar? Or are there so many variables, it's hard to figure it?
So it depends on the treatment. Our sort of cheapest basic 3/4 of an inch overlay is 300,000 to 400,000 a mile. Going up a step, ballpark, again, there are a lot of variables. Ballpark would be 600,000 to 700,000 if we went like a full 1.5 inch, 1 3/4 mill and put it back. Full on reclaim, like we're doing in Killington Stockbridge this year and into next. It could be $1 million a mile, and that's like a total road reconstruction, stabilized base project.
Well, on average, how often do you do the interstates, or that just depends on wear and tear? Simple as that.
It does, right? We'll do Sheffield Heights a lot less frequently than we'll do Williston.
Yes.
So, and again, that's where the travel weighted average comes into play here, is we're trying to balance how much traffic does it have, but not let too much of our roads get into that very poor. When we select kind of the program, we've got a system called VAMIS, where we run roughly 30,000 iterations a year to say, okay, what is the best way to optimize between pavement preservation, reconstruction, mill and fill? With that $100 million, what's the best value in over long term that we can get? And that's how we select the treatment. So, prime example, Montpelier to really all the way up to say 17, right? Starting to, that 3/4 inch is starting to come apart. So, you know, we're faced with a bunch of different challenges. And so last summer, we did a very thin mill and fill northbound Montpelier to Waterbury, which was the worst of the worst, just to keep it safe. And now we've got more robust projects trying to fill in after that. So, you know, part of it is keeping good roads good, putting Band-Aids on what isn't good, right? Because you can't just pave the worst of the worst every year, because you'll never get caught up. And saying, okay, we've got to do a significant reconstruction on this project.
Is it mostly the wear of grooves running down the road, or all kinds of deterioration?
It could be either. So the rutting you see on I-89, right, that's raveling, and that's generally going to be traffic induced. You see a lot of what we used to call alligator cracking, where it was like map cracking all over it. You know, that could be, you know, some distress just due to heaving and there being a little bit too brittle of a surface on top. Similarly, Route 12 going up through Worcester, Elmore, there's what's called some tenting, right? So we tried to stabilize the base, and the heaving underneath is basically causing that layer to heave up and break. So there's no one failure mechanism, right? If you made a road really, really rigid and really strong, you would not get any rutting, right? And you could take all the loads you wanted, but just given the nature of our roads in the winter, they would heave and you know, because you need some ductility in the top surface to allow for heaving and then to come back down. Because we don't have brand new roads that will just like heave up together and then heave back down together. It's this really continuity within the subbase that we've got to adjust for.
You paint the lines every year too?
We paint lines every year.
You do?
Yep. Yeah.
That last thing you said ruined my Monty Python idea. And this was it. The highway is all about the same width, right? What is it, 50, 60 feet?
Well, the right of way is roughly the same width.
Pretty uniform though.
The road, right, let's just take a state route, that's probably, we'll just say 24 to 26 feet.
And your state highways are all uniform. I-91 and
Oh, yeah, the interstates, yes.
yes. So if the wear and tear was from grooves, but you ruined it by telling me all the other things that are gonna go wrong, I was gonna suggest, since you paint it every year anyway, simply move the middle lines.
Oh.
You got new grooves, I guess, $400 million.
Well, yeah, and I guess.
Like that. The roofs were so bad up north that everybody had moved over.
Well, I do. I tell my wife to put her tire on the dash white line, right? Because I'll put your other tire sort of in the peak and, but I think, you know, all kidding aside, right? The paving industry will be in here Friday and they'll tell you, and they're not wrong, that simple math is if you should get 10 years out of a paving project, 3,000 miles divided by 10, it's 300 miles. Right? I mean, in the most simplistic form,
How many are we scheduling to do this year?
120.
Yeah. And I appreciate you answering that because I have not heard it in any of the other presentations as clearly as I tried to ask it. And
Yeah.
that's what, at least my public service or committee unit, we are faced with that big question of flat revenue
Right.
and massively increasing. So we're still spending $100 million
Right.
and we're getting how many?
120.
Yeah. And our 100 million 4 years ago got us
Well, it was
10,
4 years ago, it was 140 million and we were doing 220, 210, something like that. So yeah, the inflation has definitely taken us over a bit of a, I'll just say a bit of a cliff.
360 million to.
Well, I want to propose that, but.
Go by 300 miles a year, right? That's 60 million.
Back to, you talked about the bidding. Can you just give a quick description of what some of the rules are on what bids you accept, you know, so you put it out, you know, sometimes you might only get one or you might get three. Maybe you pick always the lowest, but not always. So, I mean, what are the rules that you have?
So everything we do basically is, well, I won't say everything, but the majority of what we do is driven by federal highway requirements. And so the way it generally works is a prime contractor has to be pre-qualified for the ability to bid. There's a number of things that weigh into that. Can they get bonding for that? Do they have the financial we call it MDCR, maximum dollar capacity rating? Do they have the workforce? We generally give them the benefit of the doubt for that. Aside from bidding, you need, or a bonding, you need a bond, right? Yeah. But the other sort of stuff, we give them the benefit of the doubt. Once you're qualified to bid on a project, it is always low bid. Unless we think you've done something, I won't say nefarious, but if you fundamentally unbalanced your bid, and again, this is all described in federal highway requirements, we'll accept the low bid. Now, absent a bunch of other things, we'll accept that bid. Now, sometimes we reject all bids. There's normally more than one reason why we're rejecting all bids. We try not to do it very often because the contractor has incurred some expense to bid that project, right? It's not free to put a bid together. And there is, you know, some level of credibility and partnership. When we put a project on the street, we want to advertise it. But if there are multiple things going on there that we think could save the taxpayers some money, so only one person bid it, right? Why do we think only one person bid it? Was there something fundamentally flawed with the plans? Was there just a ton of bridge work in that region that year? And maybe if we wait 1 or 2 years, there'll be more capacity. Sometimes we don't have the money and there was only one bidder, right? So it would have torpedoed the budget and we only have one bidder. You know, we've had things get tied up with right-of-way, right? We recently had to reject all bids because we got brought to the Supreme Court for necessity on right of way. We thought we were well past it, and then an appeal was filed. So, you know, there's more than one reason why we generally reject a bid.
And, contractors, they're pre-qualified. Does that also include like their scorecard for the last 10 years kind of a thing? Do you have an internal sort of like?
Yep. So we do have, every project, the contractor and subcontractors get a performance evaluation. We try to make it as objective as possible, although that can be a challenge. And basically, what I'll say is we score them and we track them so we can put contractors sort of where they are relative to their peers. But there isn't a hard and fast, like, if you score below this number, you don't get pre-qualified again. Oftentimes there's sort of an escalation there. Hey, what happened on this project? Didn't really finish on time or whatever. We'll call them in, kind of ask what's going on. Do they recognize it? What are they doing to correct that? There are a couple examples that may sort of jump that escalation process. One, if there's any prompt pay issues, right? So if we are hearing and it's substantiated that they're not paying their subs, right? We've got to take action at that point. The second thing is if there's just glaring safety issues. And again, we won't escalate slowly on that. We'll intervene and say, okay, we're done.
Thank you.
So last bit, there's a bunch of data down here, your town highway maps, the crash totals, then the transportation resiliency tools that we've talked about, which again, probably most constituents aren't going to dive into, but certainly it's there if they so choose.
Anybody else? Representative Keaton?
I've got one way out the reservation.
This is a rare chance to do that.
Thank you for the
I took
opportunity. So this has to do, and it's, like I say, it's off the reservation. So in many of the major rivers here, what we do is we have accumulations of gravel.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any mitigate? And I understand there's specific rules about that ANR has.
Mm-hmm.
And is there any way that we can? And here's what the crux of my question is, because a lot of some flooding is the buildup of the material over time is responsible for blocking the riverway and causing floods.
Yep.
Is there any mitigation that is being done in that way, or any thought about that
Sure.
process?
So I'll just sort of tie it into how we approach it. So we have to do a couple things. One, basically all of our bridges we'll do a hydraulic analysis on, which will look at that from a couple perspectives. One, what's the total waterway opening, right? And does that pass various flood events based on where it is? The second piece of it is we will look at sediment transport. In Vermont, we have a lot of areas, it's called alluvial fans.
Mhm.
And so if you think about it, right, they come down off the mountainsides, the water's ripping, it hits the flat, valley floor. As the water slows down, you drop off all that sediment. Generally, our approach would be to basically create room for that sediment, because over time, it will sort of clean itself out. I am aware of very unique situations where we have worked with Agency of Natural Resources to allow some level of cleaning out that. Again, very unique. Now, if we go back to post-23, post-24 storms, right, which are not what I'll call sort of traditional cyclical maintenance type stuff, there was huge deposits placed. We did partner with the Agency of Natural Resources to remove, it was mostly woody debris, but where there was other debris, whether it be gravel or boulders or whatever, to try to create an avenue for that water to go. We work with, geomorphologists to work, not sort of blindly do that, but to establish, okay, creating some pilot channels, reestablishing, sort of a main channel, and then maybe some flood banks, and then upwards and onwards. So I'll just say the recent history, going back to Irene, of trying to respond to 100-year events is very different than, sort of cyclical alluvial fan buildup, and we approach it in different ways.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Rare opportunity to get the top, yeah. So, great. I really appreciate your willingness to come in and not knowing what directions and where we would go. And I didn't make you bring up Route 78, but we'll,
I was nervous too, because I didn't know what I was gonna say.
we didn't go to Brandon and Pittsford either, Pittsburgh,
Oh.
Brandon, I guess. If it's funded, it's Brandon, Pittsford, and if it's not funded, it's Pittsburgh.
Right.
So,